Hello. We have a few seconds to be disciplined. Probably we can start. Hello, dear colleagues, we start our new webinar. We moved from Asia to Northern America, to US. In fact, today we are on the West Coast, near San Francisco, but in fact, you will learn that we are globally distributed today. In fact, the next webinar will stay in North America because the next webinar will be about the institution in the East Coast. But today, we are going to talk about very young, newly established university with great ambitions. It's an international collegiate institution. And maybe I will go to the housekeeping things about our webinar and then introduce our speaker today. We have 60 minutes webinar, which includes roughly 15-20 minutes conversation, presentation, and then discussion. We are recorded, be aware, and you can share your, but we are live now, and you can ask questions and use the questions button. You can also use chat. Our webinar started in September 2023, and we are traveling from one continent to another in search of interesting universities. We are Dara Melnik, consultant in higher education, and I'm Isaac Frumin from Constructor University, Bremen, and we have distinguished student committee listed here that helps us to identify these institutions. Next slide, please. So today, it's my pleasure to talk with Chief Executive Officer and founder of Woolf University, Joshua Broggi. Joshua is a scholar himself. I'm very intrigued to have an opportunity to talk to him about Nietzsche or Heidegger. He's studying German philosophy. But he also has some experience in university administration. And what's more important for us today, again, he's a chief executive officer of the Woolf University and also for-profit wing of this interesting partnership. I hope he will tell about that more. Woolf Incorporated, which is a venture company in IT. When you go to website of Woolf University, you would see a lot of colleges in different countries. So this is really, and they are not branches of one, as I understand, one central unit. So that's very intriguing, and we are looking forward to hear from Joshua and then to ask him how it's possible, what is innovation, what can we learn. Joshua, the floor is yours.
Many thanks. Really appreciate it, and glad to be here. Happy to talk about it. It's true. So I have two roles. One of my roles is as the CEO of Woolf Inc., which is the venture-backed technology company. Its goal as a profit-seeking organization is to return capital to shareholders, and then its overall job is to create software and intellectual property and patents related to software, mostly in the quality assurance space. That is different from my role as the head of institution of Woolf University and Woolf. where the goal is to make world-class higher education more accessible, to ensure that students have the best possible experience, to ensure that academics have academic freedom and produce scholarship of a high quality, and so on. Those institutions are related to the extent that Woolf Inc. provides software services to lower the administrative costs of Woolf University. So those are my two roles. It's maybe worth saying at the outset, Woolf was named after Virginia Woolf. And when I started Woolf, I was a faculty member at the University of Oxford, and I didn't, I spent a lot of time studying German philosophy and Greek philosophy. And I didn't want to do something that was falsely classicizing or old sounding, but not really. I wanted the proper 20th century, word. And we didn't want to name it after a place because we knew we wanted to create a global collegiate university that was really cosmopolitan in orientation. And Virginia Woolf wrote about what was required for academic freedom was 500 pounds in a room of one's own, and specifically for female academic freedom, which was a pressing issue in her day. And we didn't want to name the institution after a place, and we didn't want to name it after a man, as we felt that had been done many times. So a dear friend of mine, Dame Hermione Lee, who's a great Virginia Woolf scholar, and I were having conversations, and so there was maybe some inspiration there to land on Woolf. In any case, Woolf is a global collegiate university, and on the next slide, it says our mission is to increase access to world-class higher education and ensure it's globally recognized and transferable. We put quite a bit of thought into that. You could increase access to higher education, it might not be world-class, and so that would be one angle. You could do it and it wouldn't be globally recognized and transferable, and that would be another problem. Global recognition and transferability is really hard. That requires you to get governments aligned to what you are doing, and there's this sort of deep old infrastructure of accreditation. It probably goes back to licentiate and the Catholic Church and the ability to teach or something like this. It's been around for a long time in that sense, but it is related to immigration and taxes, the right to operate, and so on. And there's a lot of governmental infrastructure around that. So that is part of what we do is navigate that infrastructure. So on the next slide, Woolf is a fully accredited global collegiate higher education institution. We do offer bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, as well as doctorates. And it's a really broad range of things that we cover. We do everything from synthetic biology on human lifespan extension and carbon capture, PhDs, and so on, to very large scale computer science programs enrolling thousands and thousands of students. And collegiate universities have been around for 1,000 years, so there's nothing new or innovative, I think, about creating a collegiate university. But we are maybe the first global collegiate university that is designed to create new member colleges on a regular basis. And so, Oxford creates a new college about once every 20 or 40 years or so. So it's happening, and they're global, although all the colleges are concentrated in one small campus. Woolf's colleges are really around the world, and the students are around the world. So we have colleges or, concentrations of students in Philippines and North America, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, UK, Ireland, United States, Latin America. So there's just a very wide distribution in terms of where Woolf academics are thinking and operating. To do this, we really had to build a digital operating system for the organization that would set out the kind of QA standards, the quality assurance and accreditation process. There's a tension that has to be constantly navigated for us as an organization between the central university or higher education institution, as it is technically in some jurisdictions, and the colleges themselves. And so on the one hand, the colleges have rights in our bylaws to complete academic freedom. They can propose any courses they want. They can elect whatever faculty they want, and so on. On the other hand, the central university has total control in the limited sense that you can only propose faculty that meet the central requirements. All curriculum has to go into the central university and be processed and approved by somebody with a PhD. And so there's a back and forth between what are the central requirements in order to maintain the standards which are requisite to be an accredited institution on the one hand, while on the other hand, allowing there to be a real diversity. So, for an example, we don't set the tuition fee prices for our colleges. And so we have the same degree that you could come to Woolf to study between, $2,000 and $50,000 US, depending on which college you decided to take it at. And so you can, arrive at Woolf and pick your college. And so there's a real set of choice there for students. On the next slide, you can see a little bit of the kind of technology work that we had to do. Some of this gets very technical and complex, but we basically ingest all of the learning content from any academic program across the entire system. And then we monitor as students are consuming approved content, which we benchmark to European regulatory standards. So we are EQF rating them. We are deciding what the intended learning outcomes are at a very granular level. We're talking about a quiz question or a PDF or a video that somebody would read. So this is extremely granular work. And it means that at any given time, we have millions of consumption events happening where students are clicking on PDFs to read, and we are deciding, is this academic peer-reviewed literature published in the last 5 years? Is it field leading? What are the intended learning outcomes here? How long will students spend on this? What intended prior learning does it imply? So all of that is happening millions and millions of times at any given time with students consuming content, and we are building a record of compliance on their behalf. And so that's just really critical to what we do, because you have to have a system that is extremely robust from a quality assurance perspective, if at the same time you are going to be globally distributed and have the level of innovation and curriculum that we think is important. So in the next slide, you can see some of the organizations that we partner with, for example, Upgrad, Scalar, GoIT. These are very fast growing startups that have effectively sponsored colleges at Woolf bearing their names. And, they teach many, many thousands of students. They are updating their curriculum sometimes as many as 1,000 times per week in terms of curriculum adjustments across their degrees. And we have a team of academics that has to process all of those adjustments, determine are the intended learning outcomes, the workload benchmarks, all of these sorts of things actually in line with the quality assurance standards before the proposals are approved and students can study them as progress in their degrees. So it's a significant data operation to conduct. But the result of that on the next slide is that, Woolf degrees do have global recognition, including for immigration and citizenship. There are tax consequences, there are points on your visa, there are real world benefits today to studying in a degree program. And, one way to look at that is to say, universities have failed to be innovative in certain domains at the speed that's required in the age we live in. Maybe one way to measure this is, the total amount of writing that was ever created in human history up to like the invention of the internet is probably roughly what is produced on the internet every 2 or 3 days, or maybe every 10 minutes. It's going to be somewhere in that range, which is not a very big bound. It's like 80 years of YouTube content per day, poof, 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 right? And so that world of information is exponentially larger and faster than the world of information, which most of the processes around quality assurance and curriculum design were created at standard universities. And so I think to operate at the speed of innovation and orientation towards human progress that we want, we do need to have a system that's robust enough to move a little bit faster. So in the next slide, we have a nice quote from one of the members of our Academic Advisory Council, Stephen Koslin, who's done great things with Minerva University and a number of other organizations that he's founded. But it is a kind of novel approach to potentially helping a very vast number of students and to be an engine of, I think, much needed change, at least in higher education. It's really a challenge of threading the needle between how do you maintain quality assurance from a central institutional perspective while ensuring there's academic freedom and a strong appetite for innovation, which kind of keeps the guardrails on students as well as curriculum quality. So in the next slide, really sort of dig into what is the accreditation management system that we built, which is the central hub governing everything at all Woolf colleges. And so everything from a student having their identity verified, a faculty member having their educational credentials verified, a college being constructed in a way that fits with our bylaws, a single PDF being added to a course, which is added to a degree that has certain parameters that must be fulfilled, which is added to a college, which has certain parameters that must be fulfilled. There are a whole series of kind of nesting criteria that have to be managed to a high degree of precision with a very strong record-keeping system in order to be ready under audit conditions to demonstrate the overall compliance of the institution. So it's like the flip side of innovation here is getting involved in a very boring piece of quasi paper-based administrative work. It is precisely actually the thing that I disliked the most about being an academic at Oxford was administration and kind of this kind of paperwork. And now it's really a focus of what I do because I think it's a kind of shackle on institutions holding them back. So on the next slide, we basically say Woolf built an innovative digital operating system for quality assurance. The accreditation management system, or AMS, handles all aspects of accreditation and kind of 24/7 compliance, running the entire journey from the creation of a college, the appointment of their faculty, the creation of a degree, the compliance of all the courses in that degree, students enrolling in all those courses, the progression of students across the degree, and finally to their graduation. We really had to make a comprehensive system to deal with all of that. And on the next slide, you can see sort of a short example of the almost activity feed or news feed, what's happening at an extremely granular level, where a degree is verified, the course is added to the degree, the academic board approves of certain entry requirements to that course, the student applies and they meet the entry requirements, and then they begin studying and they attend a synchronous meeting or they consume a quiz or all these things. We're building this extremely granular picture down to the level of screenshotting the moment a student submits a piece of information or things like that. And when we support a student who's moving across borders, for example, we will sometimes be queried by a foreign government saying, well, we're not sure that the credits here are meeting the standards in our country or something like that. And we have on occasion simply pulled out the records and said, well, actually, here's the video of the viva voce examination of when the student passed their thesis defense or things like that. And then, the student goes through and they get the approval. So it's a very robust system. On the next slide, we just dig into it a little bit more. It's a source of truth for all learning activity that we do, and it's really there to make sure innovation can happen within boundaries. We don't get to define all those boundaries. Many of them are just set out within the rules of the jurisdictions that we operate in. And so, the first order of complexity for Woolf as an organization is that we're a collegiate organization. And so internally, we have these many colleges. The second order of complexity, which is a little bit more mind-bending, is that we actually own 5 collegiate higher education institutions. And so many of the colleges are actually members of multiple universities. And so we effectively sponsor a college in the name of the organization at the other organizations. And we will even do credit transfers between our own universities, which have articulation agreements between them under certain conditions between countries. So it's a level of complexity that's been rare from an infrastructure perspective to do it from a first principles basis to say, how do we get to a place where there's just extremely high quality governance and innovation happening at the same time? And the end result, though, for a student on the next slide is when you study at a Woolf college, you receive a degree certificate that contains both the name of the college and the name of the higher education institution. And then the signature of the head of the higher education institution, in this case, it's myself, and then the signature of the head of the college are both on that degree certificate. So that's roughly the system running from kind of approval of launching a new college or degree program or course all the way through to the student earning a degree. On the next slide, after building a system like that, where the granularity of record keeping for a given student and the sort of proof level of compliance with regulatory standards is so strong, you can begin doing some more risky things, or if not risky, innovative. And so on the next slide, we built a new system called StudyTrack, and the goal of StudyTrack is to make it possible for students learning online to convert their learning experience into academic credits for a degree. And so in some organizations, it's to be called the recognition of prior learning. And the idea is that certificate students deserve to have their studies converted to academic credits if they do in fact reach a level of academic credits. And so there are many organizations, including universities, that have certificate programs. And on the next slide, we talk a little bit about some of the things we've thought about. We can probably even go to the next slide, where the goal is, well, what if we built academic records of compliance at this level of granularity for people who are not in degree programs and not even enrolled in accredited courses? How close would some of those programs get to accreditation? And could we identify the gaps between those programs and a real academic program? And so as a higher education institution with degree awarding powers, we see exactly what the gap is. And so we will install a snippet of code with partners who want to offer teaching courses that are not quite at the right standard. They will produce an academic record like this, and then we will build remediation pathways for the student to go from, okay, you studied a bunch of boot campy information, and the boot camp is good, but it's not a master's degree. And so what would you need to do to take it from where it is today to get it to be a degree level course? And so you can identify with a very high degree of precision exactly what's missing for the student to go from the level of a boot camp to say the level of a degree course. And when we do that, when we've already created the digital record, we can effectively convert the entire record into, if it reaches a standard, academic credits. If it doesn't reach the standard, into a workload counting towards academic credits, although there'll be remediation gaps. And that sounds like a potentially technical or trivial thing, but the consequence is, we have thousands of students today in degree programs at Woolf who actually started in non-degree programs, did not even know Woolf existed, and they began studying something, and somebody reached out to them and said, well, actually the program you're in can count towards progress in a degree if you consider doing remediation work to elevate the standard. And so you have to take maybe exams, or you have to do other things. So that's been a really big innovation for us as an organization. And then on the next slide, just to sort of close things out, we've seen the way these kinds of programs can stack into degree outcomes. And so sometimes we'll issue smaller degrees. So, if you're going for a master's degree, a third of a master's degree would be a postgraduate certificate, or 2/3 would be a postgraduate diploma. But we're really interested, once we've got down to the level of very granular information around compliance and EQF levels, ILOs, all these sort of regulatory frameworks, how do we stack information up to lead to an outcome for a student that can be really impactful for their life if they earn a degree certificate and want to immigrate to another country or looking for a job? What do you, it's like there are badges, but badges are just sort of stickers, and they don't do a lot. Whereas if you can actually take that information and stack it into a real regulated degree outcome, that's another level of kind of quality assurance. And that is something that we are very experienced at, very good at Woolf. Okay, so that's everything that I think I want to say. Those are really ways of getting into the weeds and saying, look, to create a global collegiate university system, you have to balance the diversity of the colleges and their academic freedom with the central institutional standards. And to do that, you need to be very confident about your quality assurance system. And to innovate at speed and scale when you're working in a regulated space means that you also need to have very clear guardrails around what you can and can't do. And so we've really operated in that framework to try and create a system that makes it possible for the end academic to propose a new degree program and have it be accredited very quickly and recognized in 60 countries, which is where we have kind of default recognition today. Or for a student to come in and take an extremely innovative curriculum that is sometimes years ahead of what will show up in a university curriculum, and have it be fully recognized as graduating with a real degree. So that's where we're operating today. It's a real privilege to be involved because we have colleges all over the world. We see such a diversity of degree programs from bachelor's to doctorate, and it's real pleasure to work with all of our colleges and the students that are there.
Joshua, thank you very much. This has been fascinating and quite surprising, I must say. So I want to begin with a couple of technical questions. Could
Sure.
you tell us the total number of students, administration, faculty, and the central team that you've got, just to get the idea of the scale?
We haven't publicized those numbers, although I suspect we have to this year. So I'll pause on saying anything. But I can say across the organizations which are sponsoring our colleges, it's about $800 million of revenue for the students. But the range there is between some degrees which are maybe $30,000 or $50,000 for the degree, and you could have an MBA at that price point with sort of famous people teaching it and doing a whole bunch of things. Similarly, you could be at another college and the same degree might be $1,500 or $4,000. There's a very big range in terms of cost, which is one of our goals in order to create diversity within the collegiate system so that students end up with real choice.
Okay, so that was one evasive answer, actually. And another technical question. So do you create colleges or do you rather add them post factum?
It's a really good question. It is very technical, actually, probably more technical than you anticipate. And it can depend on the jurisdiction of the originating college as well. So the more conservative way to conceive of it is that there is a company in a jurisdiction, and that company sponsors the creation of a college at Woolf, which means the address of the college that they have sponsored is the Woolf address. The name of the college bears the name of the sponsor, and so they get the naming rights to the institution as part of their sponsorship agreement, and they get to propose faculty, propose curriculum, and propose students, but they don't get to decide what those are. Once they appoint members of the academic board at that college, it will then have to follow the bylaws of the overall higher education institution, in which the academic board has to make decisions such as admitting the students, confirming the admission standards. That is within the remit of their academic freedom as a college. They can't violate any of the institutional rules. So for example, if they want to admit a master's degree student and the student doesn't have a bachelor's degree, they won't be able to actually sign the enrollment agreement because we'll prevent it unless the student goes through a separate process for recognition of life experience. So all said, the conservative approach is to say the colleges are integral to Woolf, and their address is the address of the central institution. They are sponsored by external organizations. Some jurisdictions have a more relaxed approach to this, and in those jurisdictions, the sponsoring company simply becomes the college. In all cases, the college is a digital entity, even if they propose to have, say, in-person teaching or something like this. So it's an important point that has to be navigated almost on a case-by-case basis.
I see. So how would you delineate the areas of influence of Woolf as opposed to the owner organization of a college. So
Yep.
what do you control? What do they control?
Well, it's required of the central institution to be able to exercise control.
Mhm.
And that includes everything from unverifying the status of the college as a compliant member college, which would then make the college disappear from our website, make it impossible for further students to enroll, and would only allow all existing students to be taught out in the programs that they're in. So that would be the most extreme example of control, which is defined in our bylaws. The college, of course, could appeal such a decision, and there's a defined kind of escalation of appeals process that they could go through. It would be extremely rare for that to happen, and there'd be many steps taken in advance of doing something like that, though. But in a more practical kind of day-to-day and week-over-week experience, faculty do propose at Woolf thousands of curriculum updates per week, and sometimes as many as 10,000 curriculum updates in a week. And so all of those curriculum updates come into a central system in the accreditation management system, and every single one of them has to be serially approved. And if they are not approved, the teacher might assign them as part of the course, but they will not count as progress in that course. And so the student ultimately has to make progress in the course in order to make progress in their degree. And so there's a fairly high level of quality assurance. And to go a little bit into the weeds, I mean, we have sort of patented software around this, but it involves, for example, hash checking the approved resource as we have seen it versus at the moment of consumption, has it been modified, and has it been modified too much for us to continue the approval? And so, a teacher might send something to us. We might have somebody with a PhD approve of it. Then the teacher kind of adjusts the language and changes some of the rules on the assignment and does some things like that. We'll use natural language processing or other tools to look at that and say, okay, the changes are non-substantive. That is something we do not need to have somebody with a PhD approve. But if the changes are material, then it will have to go through the approval process again.
Okay, so another clarification question. Do you design the curriculum in a centralized way, and then every college is supposed to be teaching it, or are they actually multiple curricula that are designed by colleges themselves and you get to approve them?
Yep. So there are kind of two orders of approval. One is at the sort of license level of the degree. So take a master's degree in computer science. We will set out the overall course list, usually on the proposal of faculty. So they propose to us what they want to teach, and we will run it through a two-person blind peer review process. And once it has gone through that and gathered all the feedback on it, it will then go back to the teaching faculty. And we usually define things in such a way that they can make modifications, right? So it's like a general introduction to, I don't know, programming in Python. And so they will then fill that out in the way that they want to and teach it in the style that they want to. And the styles may vary from one-on-one teaching to 1 to 1,000 teaching, or one-on-one, highly automated teaching with quiz banks and a special custom-built development environment for students versus setting people up on more traditional environments. So there's a lot of kind of pedagogical diversity there, and the faculty have academic freedom to make those changes within whatever has been approved within the remit. Anytime they start to exceed what's been approved within the kind of license level of the program, then it has to go through a modification process. And so we'll run it back through, double-blind peer review on, okay, you want to add 5 new courses to this degree program, and so on. So there's quite a bit of back and forth.
So let's say an educational organization is interested to create a college. Do you understand correctly that then they approach you, they say, we've got this team of faculty and administrators, we've got these potential members of the academic board, and we would like to be under your umbrella, and here's our idea of curricula, and then you go through the accreditation and approval process, you give them a stamp of approval, and they become a part of you. Is a part of your, well, Woolf in general? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's roughly right. So we take in one new college a month right now. And so every month we take somebody from our queue and we bring them in as a new college. We onboard all of their curriculum, we onboard all their faculty, we onboard all their students. If they're mid-process, we'll go through a recognition of prior learning exercise to figure out the gap between what they have been doing and what they're going to need to do now that they're going to be in a degree program. They'll need to appoint everybody to their college to fulfill all of our bylaw requirements for what a college is. And so one of the important things about Woolf is we do not need permission to create new colleges. We have reporting obligations about our colleges, but the moment they become a college, they're a member of Woolf. And that means that their programs are going to be recognized everywhere Woolf is recognized. So it's sort of instant recognition in 60 countries and so on. So once the college level situation has been resolved, then the degree level situation needs to be resolved. And if they want to teach something relatively standard, then we already have the licensing for that. And so it's a question of how much does their curriculum and what they're proposing for curriculum conform to our existing degree licenses, or is it totally novel? And so usually we can get a kind of 90% conformity or 50% conformity, and then we start working on the balance to resolve it. If it's totally novel, so we have somebody coming in right now, they're going to be doing silicon chip design, and we've not had a master's degree in silicon chip design in the past, and so we will actually need to go and create a new electrical engineering degree in that space, and it will go through a full process from scratch with double-blind peer review and so on. We could try and shoehorn it into like some other degree in data science or something like this, but it's not sufficient overlap in terms of curriculum, and so they'll have to go through a whole new degree process. If they're coming in, it's just master's degree in computer science, which is very common, or bachelor's degree in computer science. Honestly, we have already made so many course adjustments to that program that there are dozens and dozens of options, and you're probably going to get a complete match.
I think Isak wants to jump in with the question.
Yeah, just to clarify, Dara, you mentioned, and yeah, there was a slide that colleges sometimes are sponsored by organizations like Upgrade or Scalar. These organizations, for-profit organizations, I think, that
we have the full range of colleges. Some of them are nonprofit, some of them are for-profit. All of them have to sponsor something underneath.
Very interesting. So, and these organizations like Upgrade or specifically Scalar, they sell courses or micro credentials. So when they sponsor the college, so the sponsorship of the college means that they now can stake these courses into the degree. Am I right that this is the main idea?
For that kind of college, that's really important. So without going into specific numbers, they may have hundreds of thousands of students who are taking short programs, tens of thousands of students taking longer programs, and then the level of alignment between those longer programs and, say, a proposed master's degree is critical. And so the more alignment you can get between the longer programs and actual courses in the degree, the better. And so you can be tracking those students and building a record for them. And so in some cases, a student might consume and complete a third, 2/3 almost of a master's degree before deciding, what I've done, actually, I'd like to move into a full degree program. And so there might be gaps that they have to remediate. Maybe they didn't consume enough academic peer-reviewed literature, or different intended learning outcomes hadn't been met in the boot camp style work. But if they can remediate those, then they get all their credits. And so getting curriculum alignment at a granular level is very important in those kinds of relationships. That's different than, say, we have some organizations that come in and they're basically doing master's degrees in philosophy or PhDs, and bioengineering or things like this. And it's just, they're already academic organizations. They just don't have accreditation. And so you're just layering on a quality assurance layer onto what is a very traditional set of programs.
So, Dara, I will just my last question at this point.
Please.
So it's really interesting. It's interesting organizational and business model. So the college somewhere in Malta or in Lithuania, they want broader accreditation. They want to work with you as more or less quality improvement or quality assurance umbrella. And so they approach you, and that's kind of relationships. So you are not responsible for their economics. You do not support them directly. Quite vice versa, they send some money for you to be able to conduct this quality assurance.
Gotcha. So on the first question is maybe around motivation and the creation of value. And the second question is maybe around economics and flow of funds. So on the motivation and creation of value side, it's an interesting observation that boot camps even exist. And, higher education economically is a $2 trillion annual spend by students, growing to $3 trillion in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's exponential growth, driven largely by countries where the sort of GDP per capita and demographics are in that direction. And so if you've got a rising middle class and tens of millions of 18-year-olds like India, there's a national focus on getting people into tertiary education. So in that kind of environment, you just need universities to really be in touch with what the needs of industry are if you're in an employment-oriented organization, as opposed to just research to expand the horizon of human understanding, which is what some of our colleges do. And so, the existence of boot camps, which is maybe $280 billion a year or something like this, is this kind of gray middle space fulfilling a gap in what universities are able to do. And so the fact that universities aren't competent generally in many countries, 27,000 universities in the world, to just like exclude all the ones that you've ever heard of, and then the remaining kind of 25,000 universities that are teaching most students, they're just generally not competent to do those things. And so, for example, it is very common for Woolf to have students who are in a master's degree at a university, then enroll in one of our boot camps in parallel, because the master's degree that they're doing was just to get the degree, but they're not learning anything. And so in that kind of environment, we look at that and say, actually, there's a lot that's just very important to us as a university that's happening in this high innovation bootcamp space. What do we need to do to bring that within the ecosystem and bring it up to a level where it can be recognized? So rather than kind of playing in this gray space where you say, oh, I did a mastering AI course. Like, well, that was 3 days. The master's degree is 2,250 hours. And so I think getting quality assurance into that space can be very powerful, and it can release a lot of value for students, because then they can be recognized for immigration. Like we have examples where students would complete a program before we got involved. They get offered a job at Google in Ireland, and then they wouldn't be able to get enough points on their visa because they just didn't have the degrees. Whereas if they did it with us, they would have the points. So those are important cases. The second one's around flow of funds. That one's more complicated, and it tends to be jurisdiction specific, and it tends to relate to a whole bunch of complicated things in our back end. So without going into it, there's some variation between our colleges in terms of when the college is when a company is sponsoring a college at Woolf that they put their name on, but the address of that college is our address. Then they become a service provider, like an online program management company to that college. They are not, the company involved is not an accredited institution. They are providing student recruitment services. They're proposing curriculum to that college. They're proposing teachers to that college, but they're certainly not an accredited institution. They're not an accredited college. The college, which is a constituent member of Woolf, is able to offer degrees because it's part of Woolf.
I got a question from the audience in personal messages about the collegiate nature of the institution. And actually, I would like to expand that question to, I wanted you to define what do you mean by collegiate? And I also want to expand the question to defining what a university is, in your opinion, and what a degree is, because we are definitely in this different dimension, I would say, that what we're used to. And just to give more context to where this question is coming from, the way we academics normally understand collegiate, and I think the way you understand it coming from Oxford, it's not just about consisting of colleges, it's also about collegiate decision making. So does that play into the model of Woolf? Or is it something that's beyond it?
Got it. So, I guess if we had to create a spectrum of collegiate universities, you might put Oxford and Cambridge at one end of the spectrum, and maybe University of London or University of California at the other end of the spectrum, with respect to the following criteria. Do you tell your mother upon admissions that you got into the university or into the college? And so, if you're admitted to St. John's or Christ Church at Oxford, you don't tell anybody you went to St. John's. You just say, I got into Oxford. Whereas if you go to Berkeley, you don't say, Mom, I got into the University of California. I got into the University of London. You only care about the college. And so Woolf has to balance those, because on the one hand, we're extremely centralized with respect to quality assurance of our programs. And so we're more at the Oxford end of the spectrum. On the other hand, our colleges have a deep and direct relationship with their students. And so it's a little bit more like the University of London side. And so we have to navigate that in order to maintain the academic freedom of our colleges on the one hand, while maintaining the quality assurance standards of the institution on the other hand. I think, when it comes to governance, all faculty members across all the colleges are members of the Faculty Council, which is the highest governing body for academics in the institution. And so we have delayed the release of certain functions in the accreditation management system until we thought we had enough diversity in the system. So very early on, it was like we had a bunch of people from Harvard and Oxford doing stuff. And if we had launched it right then, it would have been very asymmetrical, like a big tree with one branch. And so we really wanted to get to a place where there was a diverse range of colleges, highly representative, before we introduced a kind of regular cadence of voting in the Faculty Council. And so one of those odd things about starting from zero and trying to build a global organization is that we have delayed, a kind of push to our faculty to say, you need to propose things for the Faculty Council. We still hold open governance meetings, and we try and invite people to come to them. So one of them is called the Quality Assurance Enhancement Technology Alignment Committee, KTAC, which is a subcommittee of the Faculty Council that does a lot of the university business. And so, we invite students to it. We try and get stakeholders from all levels of the universities to be present there. So there are some things like that, but really, Oxford has an internal ranking system, as does Cambridge, on the quality or performance of their colleges. And we very much intend to rank our colleges against each other. And for students who make an open application, which we receive every day from students coming in and saying, which college at Woolf should I attend? These are the kinds of degrees I'm interested in. We want to be able to show them with a high degree of clarity, these are the colleges which we think are better ranked. These are the colleges where we think, based on these millions and millions of data points that we have, we actually think you will do better, which might be different than the college that's better ranked, where you'll actually get the best outcome. So those are interesting areas that we really want to push into. I don't think we're quite there yet as an organization. We're still relatively small with about 30 colleges and skew heavy in certain jurisdictions of the world. But I think we're getting very close to the point where we'll be able to publicly rank our colleges and help students make clear decisions about where to go.
So now about the nature and your definition of the university. And I apologize for the length of my question, but I want to explain what I mean. You said that you combine for-profit and non-profit colleges
Yep.
within the space of Woolf. And as far as I understand it, these two are fundamentally different because, well, for-profit colleges, first of all, they think about ROI differently than non-profit colleges because they're supposed to be spending as little as possible to educate every student to get as much as possible of profit. And then non-profit colleges would actually want to spend as much as possible for every student because they have a range of interests,
Gotcha.
which takes me to the next distinction. A non-profit institution is trying to pursue multiple goals. Some of them are contradicting. Like you do research, also you do education, you try to serve the wider community, you try to serve a student, you try to serve households. While for-profit colleges have it simple. They just want to get as much profit as they can. So how do you keep them under one roof?
So taking a big step back, let's just look at how well are our universities doing. Our nonprofit universities, the institutions that I truly love and have spent my entire career in, and I've been privileged to work at and study at and spend time at some of the top institutions in the world. Having spent material time at Dartmouth, Duke, neither of which I say much about, as well as Yale and Oxford, University of Edinburgh, KU Leuven. So just like a number of institutions that I've been really thrilled to participate in small and big ways. In general, the majority of faculty members at all British and all American universities are adjuncts earning less than the minimum wage. The average faculty member has a PhD and works at 2.5 institutions and earns less than the minimum wage. In general, the students are in debt. And so if you look at the unit economics of what's happening in a university, I'm standing at one end of the classroom. For that one class, which is one portion of that semester or term and one portion of that year, maybe there's $50,000 US or $100,000 US. As a faculty member, I'm going to earn somewhere between 2 and 5% of that. And so if I, as a faculty member, am living in relative poverty and the student is going into debt, which on average is true, what is wrong with the brokering nonprofit charitable institution, which is putting us together in that room and kind of matching students and teachers and saying, here's a group of smart students, here's a group of qualified teachers. So I think that's really worrying. It's not because they're malicious institutions, of course. They're just highly inefficient that it leads to this catastrophic outcome for people. It's just really bad for students to have teachers in that position and to be going into debt. And it's really bad for teachers to have students who are going into debt and to be living in that condition. So that's kind of problem one. And I would call it maybe the efficiency of our institutions today. Something is happening with those institutions, which is leading to that outcome. They're doing many, many things right. The quality of innovation at some of them is outstanding and so on. There are many purposes to a university, including sort of historical memory of civilization, advancing the horizon of human knowledge, training people for the workforce, training people for governance and civil society, and so on. All of which Woolf aspires to participate in advance. But under the hood of a university are many, many for-profit companies. It could be the catering division, which is seeking to earn a profit. It could be the lawn mowing service. It could be the building management service. On and on and on. There is an umbrella and then many, many for-profit vendors that are basically serving that institution, all of which represent some portion of that money which is falling through the void between the teacher and the student. You have the teacher, they're earning 2 cents on every dollar of debt at the other end of the room, and all that money is disappearing. Where is it going? And so maybe it's just universities are incredibly bad at vendor management, but there is a long list of vendors that are under the hood. And then there's a long list of administrators, right? So administrators outnumber faculty members now at most modern universities. So those are some real challenges that exist in today's universities, adjunct teaching and student debt. And so I'm deeply committed to the charitable aspirations of those institutions, but something's not quite working there. Now, for Woolf as a university, not Woolf Inc., which is building technology to service universities, but for Woolf as a university, its mission is charitable. And so it's not seeking to create a profit or anything like that. It's seeking to advance the horizon of human knowledge, make world-class higher education more accessible, ensure it's globally transferred, preserve the memory of human civilization, and effectively advance human progress. So that is what it is doing. The fact that some of the colleges within that ecosystem can meet the quality assurance and academic standards of being for-profit is not in the interest of the university. If they can outperform the other colleges, then that's great. If they do not outperform it, then we intend to make that very clear to students and they can select a different college. My observation is there's not a lot of difference between our for-profit colleges and our nonprofit colleges. Our nonprofit colleges tend to be a little less efficient in the way they do things, a little less operationally capable. And sometimes it's the same price, sometimes it's not, tend to be a little smaller, haven't raised a bunch of venture capital money or anything like that. We don't work with the kinds of organizations, though, that raise a bunch of venture capital and then don't love their students. That's just not going to be suitable to our organization. And so we've got a pretty strong filtering system when we take in a college every month.
So that face Isaac is making is because he's got many more questions, but we only have 4 minutes left. I also have some questions coming into my inbox, which is for some reason what our listeners are doing today. But we are coming to the end of our conversation. So here's the question for you. We haven't talked about the global nature of Woolf that much today, but
Yeah.
if a traditional university, which is usually local, which is anchored actually in their locality, they might be internationalized, but they are never truly global because they exist within the boundaries of specific jurisdiction and they're serving a specific state as one of their stakeholders. If they wanted to move closer to being truly global, what would you recommend they do?
Well, everybody's somewhere. You can't get around that. And people live in specific places. They have a language. They have cultural assumptions. They have different job markets or different research aims that they need to pursue. And so ultimately, to be global is just to be local in a whole bunch of places. There are certain cosmopolitan things that you can facilitate when it comes to governance and so on. But when it comes to serving students really well, you need to understand the needs that students have locally. And so, there are ways to do that where you can hire local faculty and you can pursue local students, but you need to really dig in and you need to really understand what are the needs in that region. So one, area that we operate in is the Philippines. And so we just need to really understand what's going on with, the average person who wants to come into one of our degrees in the Philippines, or same for India. We really need to understand on a week-over-week basis, what are the latest regulatory changes in India and what are the major employers asking for students that are going through programs, and what are students concerned about, and so on. So you've got to really dig in locally, make sure you've got a lot of local counsel and a lot of local faculty members that are deeply embedded in those environments, because they're going to have better understanding than we do. So at the Woolf level, we know that our colleges know more than we do about the jurisdictions in which we can operate. We benefit from an incredible vision of watching all these colleges perform in different places with different ways of getting into student environments and so on. We have employers giving degrees to their employees as a benefit, and we're just a very wide range of colleges. And so we can advise our colleges on how to be more successful, and we do that very often. But generally, their local knowledge outstrips ours.
I'll try to sneak in one more question. So you've been classically trained. German philosophy, ancient Greek philosophy, it's just as scholarly and as meta as one can possibly get. And then you've pivoted to this role that is as much a business role as it is an academic role.
Yeah.
So how does one go about that?
Well, look, you know, when the University of Berlin was getting set up, which later turned into
Humboldt University.
Yeah, you know, these were serious scholars who were leaders in their field, who were thinking about what was going to be required to advance human civilization and enlightenment as they understood it. And, you know, I think that it's unfortunate if it is true that the job of philosophers is merely to describe the world. That's just intellectual history. And I think I was not willing to sit on the sidelines watching people who were scholars of other scholars. I would much rather be somebody who was acting on the basis of ideas than just describing other people who acted on the basis of ideas. So yeah, I made the switch.
Okay, so may that be an inspiration for anyone who is a scholar but wants to do something about higher education at large. Thank you very much. I'm giving the floor briefly to Isak to announce our next webinar.
Yeah, I also want to thank Joshua. It was very unusual webinar. We spent almost all time on talking about organization, but this is fascinating organization, and we need organizational innovations. Thank you. Next seminar will be quite different because we will be talking mainly about substantive changes, curricular changes, with one of the famous innovative private universities in the East Coast of the United States near Boston, Olin College of Engineering, and its founder, Professor Richard Miller, will answer our questions. It will be an unusual webinar because we are going to distribute video of Professor Miller presentation before the webinar. So join us in 2 weeks and have a great 2 weeks ahead. Thank you.